Hello and welcome to another episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
And I'm Ginny Dietrich.
And Ginny, I think I need a mentor to help me through this whole podcasting process. Can you be my mentor?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you for
Excellent.
asking.
Excellent. So we are going to talk about mentorship today because this is something that I think a lot of small agency owners may realize that their team members need. I mean, they may need it themselves too, but we're going to focus on it from an employee standpoint. You've got employees, you want to try to help them to get to the next level in their careers. But honestly, most owners don't tend to invest a lot of time in it themselves as far as helping to bring along team members because they're all caught up in the day-to-day.
Sure.
And honestly, I think a lot struggle with, how do I even do this effectively? And so I've seen a lot of different things over the years. I've seen forced mentorships in larger agencies where people are like, okay, you 5 new employees, you're going to have designated mentors. And so they just assign people. I've seen ones where people are encouraged to get mentors, but not given any guidance as to how to find them or how does it work. And so I think the question really becomes, whether it's a mentor or something similar, how do you help your team members get to where they need to be that future employee and not just a current employee?
Yeah, I think it's there. I think you made this point somewhere along the line too, but it's less, sometimes it's not formal. Sometimes it really is, like for me, I've had situations where I've been informal mentors to clients, like especially they're young professionals on their marketing and comms teams. And where I have found that people look to me as their mentor, whether or not it's formal, is when I'm helping them with professional development and teaching and explaining. And so, lots of one-to-one meetings or lots of education during meetings, or it's that kind of stuff. Like it's helping them learn the next step in their job and kind of think through their career path. And like I said, maybe it's formal and maybe it's not. But as agency owners, I think we can think about that, like how we're best suited. And, we can't be a mentor to everybody, a formal mentor to everybody on our teams, but we are best suited to be able to say, okay, your strengths lie here, so I can see that you would go here. But having that conversation to say, hey, listen, what do you want out of your career? Where do you think you're going? How can we help you get there? And then say, here are the strengths that I see that you have. Let's work on this together. So it could be part of a formal review process. It could be an informal, like, this is just how we run things. It could be part of your culture. But there is the opportunity for all of us to really look at the people that we work with and say, these are your strengths. Let me help you play to them so that you can progress your career.
Yeah. And to your point, I mean, I think that my own view is that the best mentorships develop organically.
Sure.
They are not thrust upon you. They are not something where you're actively seeking a mentor. It's one where, perhaps you've got a current or former boss who just, really that you click with, both professionally and personally, and you can have open, honest conversations. I would say mentors are generally better when they're not doing a performance review of you, but you can still be a mentor if you are the direct supervisor of an individual. And I think managers in general need to view part of their role as being a mentor, even if it is not in a more formal, organized sense, right? We need to be thinking about all of our team members who report to us in a way of, how can we be helpful to them? And it shouldn't be just, how can I be helpful to them in terms of what's good for me in my role or my business, but how can I help them advance? Because if you help them move forward, that is ultimately good for you. It may not be exactly what you want when they decide they're going to go off somewhere else, but down the road, they might become a new client, or they might be a boomerang employee, or all sorts of potential opportunities for you. So you need to give selflessly of yourself to the people who report to you. But in general, mentors are people that the individual just really meshes with. And I think it's really hard to force that. And I've seen a lot of mentorship programs that try to do it in a more organized way. And it's better than nothing, but it doesn't work at the same level of effectiveness as ones that develop organically.
I'm sure I've told this story before because it was very traumatizing for me, but I was probably a year and a half or 2 years out of college. And I worked with a woman who was on a PIP, and my boss came to me and said, hey, we want to give you some leadership and mentorship experience. We'd like you to work with her for the next 30 days as she's on this PIP to see if you can get her out of it, to see if you can get her to exceed these goals. And at the time, I'm a year and a half or 2 years out of college, and I'm a young whippersnapper. I really thought I could help her do it. It was the most awkward, unsuccessful things probably I've ever done, because she didn't want anything to do with me. She was older than me and had more experience than I did, and was like, what do you mean I have to work with her? I don't like her. I don't trust her. Like, all of these things. And I'm like, we can help you so you don't get fired, right? It's terrible. But they wanted to give me that quote unquote experience to be able to say, okay, these are the kinds of things that you should be thinking about. And truthfully, it did give me the experience to be able to understand what works and what doesn't, and what a mentorship should look like. But it was a very, very awkward experience. And truth be told, she didn't make it the full 30 days. I think she quit after 2.5 weeks. It was terrible. It was terrible.
I mean, a PIP is the last time. You don't want to be setting up a mentorship when someone's in a PIP. I mean, PIPs are awful anyway. I've talked about this before. Yeah. PIPs are stupid. PIPs are only to CYA. And if you actually think a PIP is going to work, you're crazy.
It doesn't yet.
But that is the time to look for and try to facilitate mentorships is when someone is doing generally well or is fairly new, and you don't have a lot of they shouldn't be used as a corrective measure. And I have seen that before, where whether maybe it's even someone who's not on a PIP, but someone just, the boss feels like that this person just needs a little help in progressing. They're not quite where they need to be. Maybe we're not at a PIP, but we still want to help them. And so a mentor is the solution, not the solution. Mentors help you to become even better. They don't generally serve to fix something that is wrong. And so if you're looking at it that way, you're probably going about it the wrong way. But let's say that you've got a team and you've got some more junior employees who you think would benefit from mentorship. How do you try to arrange for them to find those opportunities? And I think it's a little bit more challenging today, where we don't have the same natural connection points because we're not in offices in the same way that we used to be. And this is, while I generally believe in remote work, this is one of the areas where I think it does create additional challenges, because in the old days, you could build some of these relationships by going out for coffee or hanging out at the water cooler or the copy machine or the fax machine or all those things that we used to have back in the day that, you youngins who are listening to us are like, what's a fax machine?
Right.
I've heard them reference it in a doctor's office, but I don't know what it is. So, how do you
hang out at the server?
Yeah. So how do you help out team members to find mentorship relationships or build them in some fashion?
I think it depends, which is the key to our podcast in general.
Indeed. We could just say that. Every episode, it depends, and then walk away. And
see you later. Okay, peace out. I think it depends on what the goals are and what your culture is like and what the person or the team has in mind. In some cases, the mentor might be external, and it might be somebody who can help them with networking or with leadership skills or pitching new business or whatever it happens to be, right? And it might be external. So I think you're right when you said earlier that it's really about somebody that you bond with, and that because the real key to it is you have to trust one another, and you have to trust that they have your best interests at heart. And if it's somebody internal, that's a little more challenging, because you have to trust that they have your best interests at heart. And sometimes your best interest doesn't align with the company's best interests, because that may be that your best interest is your employees' best interest might be that, 2 or 3 years from now, they leave the organization to go on to do something else. And the company's best interest is to keep them here, right? So you also have to keep that in mind, that a really good mentor-mentee relationship is the mentor keeps their mentees' best interest at heart, even if it's not the best thing for the organization. So it may be internal and it may not. It just depends.
Yeah, I think there are absolutely pros and cons to both. And, I think in an ideal world, it would be someone external, because it does give you additional freedom. At the same time, someone who is internal can also commiserate with you in a way that someone external might not be able to, or they would understand some of the specific, unique challenges that you have without you having to explain it in excruciating detail. Well, why is this person difficult to work with? Why are the expectations, it requires you to go through a lot more. Now, there's benefits to explaining those things sometimes, because sometimes being forced to explain what the problem is can help you to see it more clearly yourself.
Sure.
But nevertheless, I think there are clearly advantages and disadvantages to each approach. I will say that, I've seen a couple of different approaches that organizations have taken to facilitating mentorships when they're not organic. I think that there are, again, pros and cons to each. The first one is sort of, and I've been part of mentorship programs like these, where it's sort of a speed dating approach, where you have a group of potential mentors and you have a group of potential mentees, and you do the whole speed dating thing. You go around, you sit and you talk for 2 or 3 minutes, and then at the end, the mentees typically will make a list of their preferred mentors, and then some organizer will make matches for that. And that's there's one particular program where I've done that multiple times with, and I will say that those are it's hit or miss, because you still run into the issue of, maybe in those 2 or 3 minutes that you had, during the speed dating thing, there was some connection, or maybe there even wasn't, but the mentee wanted to work with you because of what you do and who they think you can open doors to, or whatever. And so, I think that there are some challenges there, but it ends up getting you a mentor-mentee relationship, at least. And so it can be productive from that standpoint, that you actually are moving the ball forward. And some of them will survive the long term, and some, will fade out after 3, 4, 5 months, whatever. But it still can be beneficial to the individual if they've never had a mentor before, to sort of see what it might look like. And so they can start thinking that through. So that is certainly one approach to consider. Probably you would need to have a larger small agency, 20, 30 employees, as opposed to 2 or 3 employees, because obviously it doesn't make as much sense if you're really small.
I think the other thing you can do is you can encourage your team to look to people they respect in the industry. If they're thought leaders or industry influencers that they really respect, or they like the way that they think, that's a good way to do it. I probably get, a handful of requests every year from especially young women who are looking for mentors to help them kind of through their career path. So, and I almost always say yes, and it certainly depends on how busy we are, but I almost always say yes. So I think that that's a good opportunity too, to look at, thought leaders, subject matter experts, and industry influencers that your team respects, and have them reach out, have them do the work to figure out if this is the right person, and do the informational interview, and, do all of the things that they need to do to make sure it's the right person for that, but really support them in being able to do that.
Yeah, no, I think, and I think that agency owners ought to be open to being mentors to people outside of your own organization. You do have to be reasonable and not say yes to so many that you really can't give the mentee what they're looking for or what they need, right? Because then you're not really serving them anymore. But I think that's less of a problem for most people than simply not saying yes enough. Because there's this fear, I have time for this. Make time. It's like the pick the brain conversations that people are, I don't have time for that. You got to pay me for that. No, look, if someone reaches out to you for career advice, wants to work with you potentially as a mentor, you ought to be open to it and try to find a way to make it work, because you probably had people like that in your career that helped you to get where you are. And so I believe you have an obligation to give back in some way. Now, if it's not a fit, or you just literally do not have time, it is what it is, right? Be honest with the person, but at the same time, lean towards saying yes, as opposed to instinctively saying, oh my God, I don't have time for this.
Yeah. And I will say that, first of all, it doesn't take that much time. It really doesn't. And secondly,
it shouldn't. If it does, then it's not a mentor-mentee
yeah.
relationship. You're a free therapist or something.
Right. Fair. But it almost, I mean, karma is great. It almost always benefits you in the long run. Like, I have someone that I mentored years and years and years ago, and she's at her third company now where they've hired us. So, like, my agency essentially follows her to every job new job. And it's because of that relationship that we developed probably a decade ago. So there are always benefits to it. It's longer term. It's a longer term investment for sure, but there are always benefits.
Absolutely. Now, the other thing that I've seen, this tends to be, again, in more mid-sized organizations, but I've seen it's not quite a true mentorship, but I've seen where the organization has brought in a consultant coach type who serves a similar mentor type role to individuals. And sometimes it's with, and I wouldn't call it a true like executive coaching kind of thing. It's not true mentorship. It's kind of a hybrid.
Yep.
But someone who can come in who has experience either on the human resources side of things or on the actual agency side or something like that, who can share perspective. Now, the trick here is that if you're bringing in someone from the outside who is paid by the agency, the employees have to feel like they can still open up. So it's going to take some time for that person effectively to prove themselves to the team that they can be trusted with your deepest, darkest secrets, professionally speaking. Because if someone can't open up to you, then you can't have a productive mentoring or coaching or any kind of relationship like that. But particularly if you really want to provide that kind of guidance and help and support for team members, and you don't have the means to do it internally, bringing in someone from the outside can get you probably 80% of the way there. Obviously, it requires an investment. It will take time for the trust to build, but that is another option that I have seen.
Yeah, and to that end, Vistage, which is a worldwide organization started out for CEOs, but now has grown into all leaders, has a new emerging leaders program. I want to say it's like $1,200, maybe $2,000 a year. But you can do something like that too, where they can go into that program and it teaches them the leadership skills they need, all of the things that they need to help you grow your business. Plus it gives them a group of people that they can trust and they sort of quote unquote grow up with, that they aren't working directly with day to day. And that's pretty successful too.
Yeah. And that's the other thing to consider is that, there are a lot of more modern approaches to mentorship because of all the technology and tools that we have here available to us. And certainly, we see that regularly in the Spin Sucks community where there are, more junior communicators or marketers in there who are asking questions and building relationships with folks. And so there are a lot of these kinds of things out there that you can take advantage of and you can encourage your team to take advantage of as well. So that, again, it's not the same as a one-on-one mentorship, but there are a lot of different ways to get the resources and support that you need in order to advance your career and help your team members advance their careers. And so you ought to be taking advantage of everything that's out there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's a good idea. It helps everybody. It helps you in the long run. It helps them for sure. And like you said, it may be that they leave and come back. I mean, they're always, I wouldn't shy away from it just because you think they're going to grow out of working with you, because that's going to happen anyway. And there'll be opportunities for you to maybe bring them back later.
Absolutely. So find a way to support your team members, find a way to help them find mentorships and cultivate mentorships and become mentors themselves. And you should be one as well. So
absolutely.
With that will draw to an end this episode of the Agency Leadership Podcast. I'm Chip Griffin.
I'm Gini Dietrich.
And it depends.